Call this meeting to order. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Ian Patrick. Stand up. He's going to be on board with us probably December 15th as our new county commissioner. We want to welcome him aboard and look forward to working with you.
Thanks, sir.
All right. And I get approval of the work session agenda. Motion for approval. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, pass 4-0. All right, discussion items. Mr. Who we got? We got Phil Penn. Phil Penn, come up. That's all right, I've lost that.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you again. Appreciate the opportunity to come and speak tonight. Just to give a brief sort of mid-year update on where we are financially within the school system. Let me kind of recap sort of real quickly where we are, and I try to make this as plain English as possible, right, without a lot of accounting mumbo-jumbo in there. So we ended 24-25 in June with a fairly minimal fund balance, and as our auditor described it, we really don't have a whole lot of margin forever in 25-26. And going forward, rebuilding our fund balance to a 4% level is kind of a key focus for us right now. And the 4% ties to a board policy that was adopted about a year and a half ago. What do we see for positive so far? Fines and forfeiture revenue is definitely trending closer to historical levels, which is good. We were intentionally conservative around that this year, and it looks like we're on pace to come in a little bit above what we had budgeted. Interest rates on deposited funds, those have been a little more resilient than what we expected them to be. We did expect some rate softening in this year, but with a lower level of deposited funds on that lower fund balance. And the very good news is that overall expenses are tracking very close to our projections so far this year. We're in a fundamentally better place than we were at this time a year ago. And I just want to call out for people that we did introduce a couple of months ago a new monthly report for the Board of Education on our local budget that's funded by the county. It's posted to our website. It provides a lot of detail around our local budget, and so it's a publicly available document that you can find in our board agenda each month. So that information is out there for anyone who wants to see it. Okay. So what do we know about negatives so far? Well, the first one, still no state budget. That's definitely creating some stress in our personnel, given the fact that we've now got increased costs on the state health plan that are being introduced in January. And there's a great deal of uncertainty as we try to plan for 26-27 without knowing really where we're finalized on 25-26. Other negative that we became aware of is that the state unexpectedly changed the methodology for how they calculate our transportation funding. So in a nutshell, instead of using the 24-25 actual numbers that we had, the state relied on our 23-24 numbers. 24-25 would have been the common practice that they had had for several years. Now, the reason that became important for us is that we had an increase in bus driver pay in 24-25. So that was not reflected in the state level funding that came through for transportation. Now, we are offsetting that with budget freezes on certain expense lines to make up that difference. And to be specific around it, that's probably a $700,000 or $800,000 swing, we think, to the negative because of that. That will eventually catch up to us next year once those bus or driver raises are reflected in what the state gives us for transportation funding. But it is definitely a timing impact that it's impacting us this year. 25-26, another negative we're seeing, there's continued growth in our served exceptional children population and a lack of in-house what we call ancillary service providers, occupational therapy, physical therapy, audiology, and speech and language pathologists. That forces us to use more expensive contracted providers. We are required by law to provide these services to these students, and if we don't have internal staff, we have to contract out for them to make up the difference. Now, so far this year, we have not received any Medicaid reimbursement revenue. The budgeted amount is $950,000. Update figure as of today, that's now $2.3 million. I do expect to have an update in about the next week or so from the state offices that control that to see when we're going to start seeing some of that money flow back to us. Some of this dates back more than 2 years, so it's got nothing to do with potential changes to the Medicaid system right now that's being contemplated within the state. These are services that we provided up to 24 or 28 months ago that we've not been reimbursed for yet. And there's always a timing delay, but the amount of the delay now has become sort of exceptional, and it's starting to impact our budget. So I'm hopeful I can update my board within the month on when we can start to see some of that money start flowing to us again.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
On the EC,
Yes, sir.
is it true that a lot of those EC teachers are now going private contract because they get paid a whole lot more than they do at the state?
It's
So
not
it's
so
kind of
much-
holding us hostage in a
Yeah,
way.
it's not so much the teachers, but it is these specialty providers that can make a lot more money going to private than they can stay on state. That's correct. Yeah. And in some cases, we've seen some former employees come back to us as the contracted provider, as the case may be. So, good question, though. Okay. So why does the state budget matter and the delay? So the last pay raise for teachers under school district employees was in July of 2024. There was no one in 2025. Keep in mind that inflation's risen by more than 4% over that same time frame. This one's going to impact people starting in January, and I just want to call out some specifics around this. There's a shift in the state health plan premium structure to 4 tiers that are based on your salary now going forward. Now, the overall premium increase, plus increases in copays, deductibles, and prescription drug costs are also part of that package. So the maximum out-of-pocket expenditures for family coverage is now $16,300. And that's on top of what you would pay for premium payments of $7,440 if you're in the top tier, and that top tier is defined as $90,000 and above in terms of a salary. What I will tell you is $23,000 out of pocket for medical in a year, if you have a bad year, is an awful lot of money if you're making $90,000. So my concern is it's going to be continuing to be challenging to attract and retain candidates to public education, especially after they changed the retirement structure in 2021. So these are compounding factors that makes it more difficult to try to get people into public education as opposed to public education as opposed to private industry, right? Now, here's one that kind of concerns me as I look forward into building the 26-27 budget. It's impossible to project the compounded effect of the salary growth right now. There is a scenario in which I will need to turn in my homework to the county on a projected budget for 26-27 without having 25-26 fully resolved. Now, the reason that gets interesting is that 2 annual 3% raises did not equal a 6% increase. And the reason is you're compounding the raises over time, right? Now, that 0.1 or 0.2 difference, that may not sound like a lot, but in the level of payroll that we have within the district, which is over $200 million, that 0.2 or 0.3 becomes pretty significant for us. So we're kind of shooting blind, as the case may be, in terms of trying to project that. Now, I think what probably will wind up happening is if we do get to that mid-April timeframe, we have not heard anything on 25-26, we'll have to caveat what we have in there and say if it needs to, we may have to come back for a special appropriation if what comes out in 25-26 is higher than what we had budgeted. And that budget is 3%, as is shown on the last bullet point on the slide. Okay. Okay. Delayed federal budget. It's stressful, certainly, but the impact on CCS was actually fairly minimal. The good news is we had already received our primary federal grant funding prior to that shutdown taking place. You may recall that there was initially some delays on the title funding grants as they were sorting through which ones were going to move forward. We did get all fully funded on those before the government shutdown took place. I know the key focus for a lot of people asking questions around what the impact of the federal budget was. Our school nutrition program, or SMP, is very strong financially. We're sitting on cash reserves that would have carried the program's payroll for several months if we were not receiving federal meal reimbursement. And it's actually funded differently. So SMP is different than SNAP. So it's funded differently than some of the SNAP benefits and EBT benefits that you would have heard about being talked about as part of the shutdown. Now, we're still monitoring, along with everybody else, what's going to happen to the U.S. Department of Education. There's a lot of talk of that being consolidated away and certain pieces going to other agencies. You know, the concern for me would be that you lose some of the expertise, right, when some of that happens. You lose programmatic experts that are there to answer questions on behalf of districts and state departments of education that potentially go away with that. And frankly, from what we've seen, you know, we're restarting this process at the end of January, right? Because this is only a temporary hold on the budget at the federal level until we get to the end of January. So hopefully there's a more permanent resolution that takes place between now and then. More to come on that. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about 26-27 and sort of what I think are kind of key factors as we develop this. You know, state budget decisions. It's interesting, and I pointed this out to a few people last week. We don't control a lot of our costs. The salaries are set by the state legislature. The pension costs are set by the state legislature. The healthcare costs are set by the state legislature, so if you think about an organization like ours where 70 to 80% of the costs are in people, we don't determine a lot of those costs. Those are set for us and handed to us. I do expect that we're going to continue to see growth in the EC student population and a higher concentration of needs among those students as we move forward. We're expecting to see higher costs for routine facility maintenance. This isn't even the deferred stuff. This is the day-to-day items like custodial supplies, mowing contracts, and painting contracts. We know we are going out to an RFP for mowing services in January, and we're definitely expecting to see higher costs in that contract when they come back to us. And lastly, we know that there's approved utility rate increases that are sitting out there that are going to affect the 26-27 budget. In particular, where we've looked at Duke Energy, which probably provides about 70% of what we utilize, has already got filed rate increases out there that we expect to go into effect, that we'll have to incorporate in. Okay. All right. So how do we mitigate some of, actually, I'm going to add one more onto this list, and I discussed this with the board's finance committee about a week and a half ago. We've got two aging financial and HR systems within our public school system right now. The HR system is old enough that we've started to now see a decrease in functionality that they are no longer supporting with upgrades on that system. The state has said at some point that we need to go to a cloud-based program as well. We are starting to have initial conversations with the various vendors that are approved within the state of North Carolina to be replacements for that. I will tell you, having gone through 3 different system upgrades in my career, they are expensive and they are painful. My guess for a district our size, that's probably a $300,000 to $400,000 item. And that is just the cost of the conversion, not the actual software itself. What I would also tell you is that it requires us to probably add personnel into both the HR and the finance staff to address some of that as we go forward. We all have full-time jobs. I do not have capacity within my team to create project managers to support a transition like that. That is something that I learned over the course of my career that's the right way to do it. Now, frankly, I've got a retirement wave coming in within the finance organization where I probably have 6 people going out out of a total of 17 in the next 2 years. One has already started, so that wave has already become. So the intention would be we start to pull in people to serve as creating capacity for the more senior people in my group that then allows them to take on that work of being project managers on a system conversion and also allows for time for knowledge transfer out of those folks, because between the 6 of them, you've got over 200 years of experience within the school system. So that's a lot of institutional knowledge that would otherwise go out the door without that. So that is a very unrefined number based on prior experience, but as I said, we're starting to have initial conversations with some of the vendors out there, and we're going out with a formal RFP in the spring to support that system upgrade. So how do we offset some of that cost? Well, the first one is program choice review. Now that doesn't mean we're doing wholesale elimination of program choice. What it means is that we're taking a look at the utilization across all the different schools and across all the different programs that we have to make sure that we're being as cost effective as possible at the delivery of those programs. And to say rationalization around if it's something that could be done at less than the number of schools that's being done today, is that something that we should be considering as resources become more scarce for us to manage these programs going forward. We are going to make increased use of the Cabarrus Virtual Academy versus the more expensive state-run platform. That acronym stands for North Carolina Virtual Public School. That's something that we think there's a pretty significant opportunity for us to consolidate some of what we pay to the NCVPS and do it internally in a way that better supports the needs of our kids, particularly at the high school level. That's where most of that plays out. Position allotments are a big part of what we do within the budget. As I already stated, we probably have 70 to 80% of our budgets tied up in personnel. As I've said internally to my team, if we get the personnel wrong, the rest kind of doesn't matter, right? You're talking about errors around the margin if you get the personnel incorrect. So this will be the 3rd go around for me on refining that position allotment model that we do with the HR team. We've already identified changes that we're going to make for the upcoming cycle. Some of that will be shared with principals at our pre-K-12 meeting tomorrow. But that's a process that continues to get better as time goes on, and I'm appreciative of the collaboration we've had with HR around that process. Cooperative purchasing, alternative sourcing, and RFPs, we're increasing the use of that as much as possible to make sure, even if it's a longstanding vendor that we've had a relationship with, pushing the envelope on where the market is right now. Some of that obviously is determined by the the level of the RFP by state statute and by board policy. But even if it's below that threshold, I've seen more work being done now around making sure that we're going out to market and getting alternative pricing to make sure that what we're paying really reflects where the market is at this point. One of the things we're starting to look at is reevaluating what I would call a buy versus build decision on several of the vendor relationships in whole or in part. In other words, there are certain services that we have outsourced to vendors right now. There's a buy versus build to decide, are we better off doing something internally as opposed to paying for somebody else's profit margin, which is effectively what you're doing when you have an outside vendor relationship. So I would expect to see more of that activity going forward. And this one's come up now a couple of times. I think there's a case for evaluating alternative models when it comes to the technology that we have across the district, particularly with one-to-one. One-to-one became an offshoot of the pandemic. Certainly everybody rushed out to buy the devices to support that. The problem is, how do you get the genie back in the bottle at this point? And then the second piece of that is, with high-stakes state testing that takes place at third grade, what's your ability to have a third grader be successful on that testing if they've never been on the platform that you're using to do the testing on, right? Those are the kind of things that we have to look at. It's not a snap decision to say, well, we're not going to have any of these devices in grades K to 3, for instance, right? There's more that goes into the decision than that. But this is an active thing that we're looking at to say, is there a way to get more efficient at doing this? Because, as an example, if I had to replace every device that we had in the district right now, it's about $24 million to do it, right? And if you think about the replacement cycle on technology, particularly on Chromebooks, my head of IT hates when I say it this way, but it's basically disposable technology. Chromebooks are not intended to last more than 3 or 4 years, right? So I think there's got to be a pullback away from where we have the model today, right? But that's more work than it probably sounds like on the surface, I would say.
I just want to comment on that too, because that was something that I had discussed previously, being on the school board, was how we are doing the one-to-one with the Chromebooks. And I know that we started that because of the pandemic, but it is incredibly cost inefficient for us to do that for every student, to make sure that they have their very own technology, especially at the elementary level. I just don't think something like that is sustainable for us to be able to do. So I'm glad that you guys are looking at that as well.
Good. Thank you.
Hey, on that, just to be straightforward, that sounds to me like something you need to do away with, just by what she just said. We never had that stuff when I was in school, and I think we did a lot better, so.
All right. So, very quickly, a quick look at capital. Now, there's a lot of refinement that has to go into the capital budget, particularly with all the construction work that's happening around the district right now, and sort of what's planned in the immediate future, right? But if we were going to sort of say, set that aside for the moment, capital request for 26-27 might look very similar to what we had for 25-26. You'll see on there the $4 million that we had originally requested for the Chromebook replacement, replacing TVs and interactive devices with smart boards, and the Promethean boards, which is the latest technology around that. That $5.3 million request got funded at the $3.1 million level, and what I will tell you is we went entirely for Chromebooks. We did not include any Promethean board purchases in 25-26, just given where the need was for the Chromebook devices at this point. I would expect security cameras will continue to be on this list for some time. That is a question of adding cameras, replacing cameras, and it's the storage that actually is very expensive for running those security cameras, because we try to maintain about 30 days worth of video footage, and video is, of course, fairly memory intensive to store. Some good news on the paging and intercom systems. We had a budgetary request, and I should clarify, paging and intercom systems are critical in a school environment, that you need to be over the intercom system to let people know what's going on in the building at all times, right? And we've got areas of certain buildings that have failed now and are not working as properly as they should. So we had originally budgeted $800,000 to do replacement work at about 8 schools in 25-26. The good news is the technology has shifted. So it's now a hybrid digital and analog system that they're using to do replacements. So the $800,000 that we received this year will now cover about 15 schools instead of 8, which is good news. We intend to continue to utilize that program going forward, that type of structure. So what would originally have looked like a 4 or 5 year replacement cycle will now drop to somewhere around a 2 or 3 year replacement cycle. So that's good news in that respect. And of course, any of the new construction, or the newer construction does not require replacement at this point. We have had a couple of discussions here around maintenance projects, particularly in the size of 25,000 to 499, and then 499,000 and above. You'll see in the left-hand column the $52 million in requests that was originally funded at $10.1 million for the smaller projects, and then we did a hybridized list a couple months ago that we came to you for approval on. And the intent would be certainly to have that hybridized list going forward, right? I think that definitely is a fundamental shift in the way we've been presenting that, and I think that's going to be better for us going forward. You're aware, of course, of the Northwest Cabarrus High School replacement, the new elementary school in the Northwest. These are the numbers that were in the current year budget request, and that's part of the 26 budget funding, debt funding, I should say, going forward. So I do not expect to see anything in a construction standpoint other than those two items as we go into next year. But we will update that, I call it the 12 box. It's the 12 priority projects going around, sort of the rectangle, as it were, and sort of, projects that are actively being worked on, and then shifting within those boxes going forward, right? Okay. So just to quickly summarize, the key focus going into 26, 27 is going to be on getting the staffing levels correct. I'm expecting utility and maintenance costs to be higher, and again, those are routine maintenance costs, not the the deferred maintenance cost. Could be a delay in federal funding if there's a really significant shift in the U.S. Department of Education structure. As I said, we're going to ensure that any of the capital requests that we have are going to use the new hybrid prioritization that we created a couple of months ago. All right, with that, questions? Through the chair.
I know that we had talked about previously in the last budget, we've always, I guess, the county has always anticipated a 4% increase every year, and then it ends up being 10 to 12% that we end up funding y'all. And I know that we had conversation last year about that this coming year in 26, we're not going to be able to go any more than 4%. Do you guys anticipate that will be doable? Like, where do you see that moving into this next budget cycle?
If I had a state budget, I could probably answer that question. Without one, I don't think I can.
So when we had talked in the chair, vice chair meeting, when we were talking about the potential for the teacher increases, I just want to put this out there too, so everybody kind of knows that anything over 3%, we would be, so if it's 4%, for the increase, it's $1.5 million, right? So for anything that's 1% over 3%?
1.7.
Okay, $1.7 million.
And that includes everybody who's a state employee, right, which we all are, right? So
Right.
it's not just the teachers, because a lot of times we're subject to what they do with the budget for everybody,
Right,
right? But yes, we carried in this year's budget request to you, which you funded 3%. Anything that comes in 3%, we will not have funding for.
right. So we're at this point in 26 projected to be 13.7 million deficit.
13, we're continuing to refine that. Rosh will have some updates coming at the regular meeting.
With the potential to then have to fund the school system an even extra amount of money depending on what the percentage
Correct.
for
This-
teachers is.
This is why we wanted to get this conversation out here publicly, provide transparency about what all is going on
Yeah.
with the school's budget and the county budget. We thought the mid-year time was a good time to have
Absolutely,
this
I
conversation
agree.
and make sure
Yeah.
everybody was on the same page about what challenges we have coming with the budgets, with their budget, with our budget.
Right, thank you.
And a follow-up to that, Phil, there's a number been batted around of what they're gonna come in at. I know it's not official or anything, but what have you heard from the state?
I've heard there may not be a budget this year.
Okay.
We went with the Senate version, which was a 3% increase, and so did every other large district CFO that I talked to. We all agreed, working independently, that 3% was the right number to use. The House proposal had not been issued by the time we had to submit our budget, so we went with the Senate one. I have actually heard we may not see a budget this year. So we might be carried into 26, 27 without anything other than the continuation budget and the small mini budgets that we've seen so far. The last set of conversations I had, there was not a whole lot of optimism for getting any kind of change into this current year.
Okay.
I'd like to offer you some insight on that, if I may, from my little over 11 years in the State House and on the Education Committee. You're being affected by stuff that has nothing to do with education. That's the problem we have with the budget up there.
Yeah.
I remember 2015, 30 of us stood up to Tim Moore and said, you're going to take this stuff out of the budget or we're not voting for it. We had 12 items, and he tried to pick people off. He didn't bother me because he knew better, but he kept trying to pick people off. I'll offer you this, or I'll do that for you if you'll go ahead and vote. But out of the 12 items, we got down to about the end of September, last week in September, and he finally said, okay, we'll take 8 of those 12 items out if you go ahead and vote on the budget September 30th. Otherwise, we do without a budget till next June 30th. And that was 75% of what we were after, so we took it, took $420 million out of the budget. One of the things that I think is going on, I mean, I'm not there anymore, but I know a lot of the people who are. And I think part of what you're seeing is Destin Hall is not going to get pushed around by Phil Berger like Tim Moore was. And they got disagreements between the House and the Senate, and they're trying to work all that out. Unfortunately, it affects you in a way that we wish it wouldn't. But I'm sure that's a lot of what's going on, is there are just things that Phil Berger and his crowd want to push that a lot of people in the House are not going to go for it. And so that's what's going on.
Real quick too, I just wondered, so y'all had mentioned, or Commissioner Jones, you had mentioned that you and Kelly were gonna go meet with the governor.
So we met with the staff of the governor. Who was that guy we met with?
He's the local liaison out of Charlotte.
Out of Charlotte. We did meet with him. He said he doesn't see a budget coming.
Okay, I just didn't know.
Yeah, we put in our concerns and what we needed and we wanted to see, but it went nowhere.
Okay,
Yeah, he was fairly new. I think it was just a meet and greet as far as he was concerned, so
Yeah.
we
Gotcha.
kind of gave him some heavy stuff.
okay.
Do you anticipate asking for a teacher supplement this year?
An increase? We haven't discussed that internally yet.
I only ask because on this PowerPoint, it says that the last pay raise for teachers was July 2024, and then it points out that inflation has risen by more than 4%. And I just, like, we point blank asked the school system, do you want us to fund the operational budget, or do you want us to fund the teacher supplements? And the school system went, so I'm just curious if you're going to come and ask to make up 2 years' worth, or if you're just trying to get a heads up on where that's going.
Well, I think we've got a number of competing things going on, right? And I'm not insensitive to the fact we asked for an outsized increase going into 25, 26. That outsized increase addressed what I would call a systemic deficit that was embedded in that system that really went undetected for a long period of time, frankly, until I got there, right? And it kind of called out like where we are really. Now, as I said earlier tonight, we're in a fundamentally different place than we were a year ago when I was facing a $14 million deficit and figuring out how we're going to get out of that, right? We don't have that issue today, right? So that increase went a long way to solving that. My concern going forward is, I'm sensitive to the fact that, you've got a 4 or 4.5% increase, what's loaded in the model going forward for us into next year. I can't commit to you today if that's what it's going to work out to. But we know what the number is, and we're going to try and get as close as we can to it. But the number we come back to you with is going to reflect what we really think the need is, and having gone through those mitigation efforts that we talked about on the prior page.
I was thinking about something else I'd like to ask about, the EC students increase.
Yeah.
Do you know what's pushing that? I assume there's some health situation that's pushing that increase. I doubt it's just more people with EC students moving into the county.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's probably some of that, but what's going on with that, do you know?
Well, I think there is, and I've seen this in the other state that I worked in, something very similar. When you have a well-run EC student program, you become sort of a center of excellence around that, and parents who have EC children will want to move to your district to receive those services, right? Frankly, if I was one of those parents, I'd probably do the same thing if I had the ability to do so. So I think that's a big part of what we're seeing out there. I don't think that there is necessarily if you were to exclude autism from the statement, fundamentally more kids being identified as EC, but autism is a real thing, right? That is a very strong growth indicator we see within the EC population that we serve, right? So I think it's both, right? So we see an influx of what we attract to Cabarrus County because we're good at running that program and we deliver the services that the students should be receiving. But there is this underlying trend, particularly around autism and autism spectrum disorder diseases that affect us. Absolutely. Yeah. Questions?
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Appreciate you.
All right, next, we'll go to the Facility and Design Construction Behavioral Health Care Center. I believe we have Michael Miller.
Good evening. This presentation is just for information. There isn't anything that you need to approve. I'm just making you aware that the dollar figure for the behavioral health care center, the contract with Messer is going to change, and it's going down, so it's going in the right direction. But once again, it's just standard procedure that we let you know that the contract amount is going to change from what you've agreed to. So when we developed the guaranteed maximum price for the project, we agreed to allow Messer to include a bid contingency in their pricing, since they had not actually received bids from the market at the point that we needed the GMP, and that was due to schedule for the financing. So using a bid contingency, it allows us to encumber money for unforeseen costs that might not have been expected during the construction estimate phase. So it also allowed Messer to keep their fee at the level that they initially quoted to us, because otherwise they probably would have increased their fee to compensate for giving us an early GMP that was not backed up by real bids. So the original bid contingency was approximately $3.3 million, and I'm using round numbers. All these numbers are actually higher in reality. I rounded them all down. The original bid contingency was $3.3 million. After realizing some bid savings, when Messer did take the project out for bid, the bid contingency went up to a little over $4 million. So at this point, all bids have been received, all subcontracts are in place, and we're comfortable saying that we don't think that we'll need that extra $4 million bid contingency for actual construction. So we now have the option of taking the credit from Messer, or we could leave the money in the contract to help with anything that may come up between now and the end of construction. Mind you, there are existing owner's contingency money and construction manager contingency money already in the GMP, so we've got money to cover things we don't expect to come up. So having said all that, there's currently a need for approximately $500,000 for furniture. The original budget going into the project was $1.2 million for pricing, or for furniture, and that pricing came back at $1.7 million. So my plan is to request a credit from Messer in full for the entire bid contingency, and then use $500,000 of that money to cover the gap, and just allow the remainder of that money to go back into the construction account and sit there unencumbered. So I know that was a lot of numbers and information, but in summary, the contract price with Messer will decrease approximately $4 million. And I'd like to take $500,000 of that to cover the gap on the furniture. So, are there any questions?
So essentially, we'll have $3.5 million if you take that $500,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct,
And
and
that will go
that
back in.
funding can only be spent on that campus, so therefore it will likely be going toward repaying the debt.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Next, Landfill 5-phase expansion, Kevin Grant.
Good evening. This agenda item is for the construction and demolition landfill Phase 5 expansion project. The expansion size is about 2 acres and will require about 60,000 cubic yards of dirt to be moved. This expansion will provide us with at least 4 years of additional airspace. A formal bid was initiated on November 6th. A total of 8 contractors submitted bids to perform the expansion construction. The bids were opened on November 25th and are summarized on the bid tabulation sheet. I don't know if you want can scroll down to that to show. And with the exception of that first bid, they were fairly close, with Ike's Construction being the low bidder. Just let everyone know, the landfill operates self-sufficiently under an enterprise fund system. Fees charged to the various waste received cover the cost of operating the landfill, yard waste, and residential convenience center. The landfill fund is covering the cost of this expansion and was approved as part of the fiscal '26 capital improvement plan. Due to the rapidly decreasing amount of airspace, I'm requesting award approval at this work session in order to begin construction as soon as possible. In conclusion, I'm requesting a motion to suspend the rules of procedure due to time constraints, as well as a motion to approve the contract between Cabarrus County and Ike's Construction Incorporated, and to authorize the county manager to execute the contract on behalf of Cabarrus County, subject to review by the county attorney. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the motion to approve the contract between, actually, first I want to make a motion to suspend the rules.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Then I'll make a motion to approve the contract between Cabarrus County and Ike's Construction, and to authorize the county manager to execute the contract on behalf of Cabarrus County, subject to review by the county attorney.
All in favor, say aye. Pass.
Thank you.
For action, active living in parks, Brian Hagler.
Good evening, Commissioners. Come before you this evening for our annual fees and charges update. We, as the Active Living and Parks Department, update our fees and charges based off of the calendar year versus the fiscal year, a lot of because of our programming. So things like a long-term program that we offer as a summer day camp program, we wouldn't want to have a fee structure change in the midst of that program going on. So that's typically why we come before you annually as a calendar year adjustment. Some very small adjustments this year, so we just made a little cheat sheet for you to go off of what we were proposing to go through and change. Are standardizing the rental timeframes for our indoor facilities. So currently, we have indoor facilities at Camp T in Spencer Park and at Frank List Park. So the goal right now is to standardize that from to mimic the barn facility at Frank List Park at Camp T in Spencer of a 1 rental time frame instead of 2. We are seeing more of the 2 or the single all-day reservations at Camp T in Spencer Park than we are the single or half days. And the staff constraints of being able to turn over an indoor facility with all that they have going on, and then also to provide that high-quality reservation, it made sense to us to make this adjustment here and just provide a single time frame for those. And then the adjusted cost for that along with those changes. Another piece is requiring a 2-night minimum rental for cabins and tent sites at Camp T in Spencer Park year-round, instead of just during our warmer months. That change several years back to our warmer months requiring a 2-night rental had a drastic change in just the quality that we can provide and not having rentals turn over mid-year, and then also stops folks from potentially looking at us as a Friday night place that we don't want to have those types of late evening events going on at. So having a 2-night additional, having an additional charge to that really helps push that out of the situation. We are also adding a setup fee for the Franklin Park Barn, $50 for anything outside of our traditional setup. Again, just helps with the staffing fees and then bringing in additional revenue for that facility. I also see here an increase in personal fitness training from $35 an hour to $40 an hour. That is still a very low cost for personal training, if you're aware of personal training costs, but we should see a true value to our participants at providing that service there, but we need to bring in more than our direct cost for providing such a premium service. So that adjustment there is just making sure that the funds that we do put to that also bring in more than our direct costs. And lastly here, an added option for a day of or drop-in class pass, as the staff are calling it, at the same rate. But what this provides is we are in many different ways waitlisted on all the classes that we are providing out of our facilities. And so unfortunately, the side of that is there's a lot of folks that are waiting to get into classes, but we have folks who are either sick or unable to attend all of the classes during a 6-week-long session. So if we know we have folks not able to come in, this allows folks to come in and jump in and participate when we know we have an opening in there. So it allows for a more full class, has a better atmosphere for our instructors, for our participants, and then also, obviously, a little extra revenue to go along with that. So these proposed changes or recommendations have gone before our ALPS Commission and were unanimously approved to go before the BOC for you all. Can I answer any questions?
So I was just wondering, based on your study, I assume y'all studied the numbers and came up with these looking at information. What is the projected increase in revenue from doing this, do you think?
It's tough to say, especially for like things like the class pass. We're not sure what that would look like. Your projected revenue increase for your personal training is going to bring in roughly about $5,000 more to provide that. It's a very small service of our overall budget that we provide, but we are currently charging what it costs to provide the instructor there, so this will provide additional revenue on top of that. Our goal is to provide 100% of our direct costs, so this is to do more than that for that specific piece. So it's a small portion of our budget, but it will provide additional revenue there. And then the rental timeframes for the facilities, I would imagine that's going to be pretty consistent. I don't see a big swing in additional revenues in that, but I would imagine a small percentage increase on those rental timeframes, providing that you have less rentals that are happening during the winter timeframes, but they will obviously provide some additional revenue, more offset of our overall cost.
Anybody else have any questions? Move this to consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, next we have the Cabarrus Rowan Metropolitan Planning Organizational, Susan Morris. There she is.
Good evening, Commissioners. What you have in front of you is a standard appointment. We have 2 positions that we typically staff up for the MPO at our level, and that is the Technical Coordinating Committee. Phil Collins and I typically serve in those capacities, so we are just asking that again be allowed this year. These appointments are on a 1-year term, so typically we bring it back to you in December. And then you all can also be thinking about the TAC component of this, which is the elected official component. You will also need to look at reappointments for calendar year 2026. That's it.
Any questions? We move this to consent agenda? Okay, move to consent. Thank you. Next, we have Human Service Advisory Board, Elise Pugh.
Sorry about that. Ms. Lancaster has requested to step down from the Human Services Advisory Board, so this is just an item to remove her. Her last meeting will be this Wednesday, December the 3rd, and at that time, we will also discuss possible replacements for her with the current Human Services Advisory Board members.
All right, any questions? Move that to consent, please. All right, Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee, we have an appointment. Anybody got any questions on that? Move to have that to consent. Okay. Next is the removal of the Tourism Authority. Anybody got any questions on that? We can move that to consent. All right, next is the resolution establishing the Board of Commissioners 2026 meeting schedule. Everybody had a chance to review that? Okay. Any discussion? All right, move that to consent. All right, next we have the authorization for Cabarrus Soil and Water Conservation District to approve a grant contract. Amy Cook?
Good evening. Last fall, the Soil and Water Conservation District applied for 2 conservation easement grants through the state. There were over 100 applications statewide, and they are funding 6 of them. So we're very excited that 2 of those are here in Cabarrus County. So we are requesting your approval of those 2 grant contracts, as well as the associated budget amendment with those. I will say that any matching funds for the district are already included in our regular budget, and we're receiving other additional funds from the landowners as well as the federal government.
Anybody any questions on those?
And just for clarity's sake, the 2 items are on the same budget amendment that's attached.
Thank you,
All right,
Kelly.
can we move both those items to
I
consent? or-
think it'd be fine. I just want to say, I'm glad I didn't have to put that paperwork together.
They're very long contracts. Thank you for reading through those.
All right,
They do need to talk quickly about the second one.
Okay, talk
Do
quickly
you
about
need to
the
talk
second one.
about the second one, or? you good?
Those, they're the same.
Okay.
I just put them
That's
on 2
fine.
different items.
All right.
gotcha.
Perfect.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So move both those items to consent. All right, next is the amendments to Chapter 32 Code of Ordinance, Farmland Preservation. Doug and Terry, you doing it?
I'll start off.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. If it pleases the board, Tracy LeCompte, the Ag Extension Director, and Sarah Newman, Ag Extension Agent, are also here to answer any questions you may have. But I'll just lead off with a briefly touching on this. You all should have this document
Yes.
with your agenda. And so you can see from that, I can certainly answer any questions or explain any of that you want me to. But as you'll see, the changes we've made are all addressed at strengthening the ordinance, making it more user-friendly. We've streamlined the application process. We have, most of these changes you'll see were required by the 2021 Farm Act. So this Chapter 32 of our ordinances has been in place since 2005, I believe. The Farm Act is the enabling legislation at the state level. The Farm Act has been rewritten twice since then, so 2016 and 2021. So we're going through and incorporating changes that the Farm Act has required. One of them, Sarah and Tracy had already started on. We are required by state law to map all the voluntary ag districts so that everybody can see where they are. And that was a project they had started with our mapping department, and then when we started working on the ordinance, we realized that that's actually required by state law. So we're getting that in place. It is functional on the GIS website. Not all of them are mapped yet, but if you go there, there is a layer you can add, and you can see where they are. You can see the buffer areas around them. So that's going to be a very good change. We're also streamlining the process if someone who was granted an easement passes away, and the family members sometimes approach Ag Extension and want out of that or want to amend it in some way, maybe remove a part of the land from it. We didn't have a clear process in place for that, so that just led to a lot of confusion, a lot of unanswered questions. So we have a process in place, not that it would always be granted, but there's a process in place for that. But I'll answer any questions you all may have now or later, and turn it over to these ladies for more information.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Newman. Like Doug said, I'm the livestock and field crops extension agent here in Cabarrus County. I've been working pretty diligently on voluntary ag district over the past year, kind of cleaning up this process and this program that we have available for our citizens. So just a little rundown really quickly. We offer both the voluntary agricultural district as well as the enhanced voluntary agricultural district. We were actually the first county in the state to do that enhanced voluntary ag district back in 2006. So we do have a really great program in place, but there was some updates, like Doug said, that needed to be done. So both of those offer a voluntary conservation easement done through landowners. So they come to us saying, we want to pursue some sort of land conservation. What does that really look like? We help them there. So it helps with that recognition and protection of farmland preservation. The biggest change that we really see with this ordinance update is what Doug was mentioning, with kind of clarifying what the death of a landowner really means as far as it comes to this document. You're with the enhanced voluntary ag district, you're in that for a 10-year period. That's signed, has to be approved by our board, our voluntary ag district board. And there, you're in that for 10 years, regardless of a death in the family. That kind of needed to be cleared up and clarified. There was some back and forth between a couple different families and things like that, just to clarify that across the board. So the ordinance does a great job explaining that. Other updates were kind of just some general statewide legislative changes that needed to be reflected here in Cabarrus County.
We know that the majority of the parcels that are in the program were in that initial class that actually got recorded and finalized in 2006. And because it's a 10-year agreement, we know now in 2026, a lot of those are going to be coming up and due. So we wanted to make sure that we had all of this verbiage cleaned up and ready to go. So we know that the landowners who are wishing to re-enroll for next year know what they're signing up for, and it's clear and concise and transparent for everyone involved. Do you guys have any questions, thoughts, feedback?
No question. All right. Move that to consent agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next we have Bird Church property. Kelly?
Thank you. As you all are aware, I guess it was a year and a half ago or so, we were able to enter into a lease agreement with the Bird Church. They have requested additional property. We worked with the school system to determine that that property is available and that they are okay with that. We have worked with the Berg Church to get an independent appraiser to offer us a value on that. I sent you all the appraisal to look at. I believe it was $119,200. And with that, I'll let Doug give a little more detail on the process.
Sure. Thank you. So we're somewhat involuntarily brought into this situation because it's a school property that they're looking for, but we are currently holding the title because the property secures some of the financing. So about a year and a half ago, when you all entered into the lease, the thinking was 5 years from now, when the lease expires, there's an option to purchase in the lease. At that point, the financing should be paid off, and the financing would not be encumbering that property, and then you could make a conveyance, or the school system could make a conveyance. So even though we hold title, as Ms. Sifford said, we talked to the schools where this property is. My understanding is there's really no other use for it. It's somewhat separated from the school, and of course, some of you may be familiar with how it looks on the ground more than I am, but so I think everyone is in agreement with this. I have drafted just a proposed addendum to the document that's already in place that the board approved a year and a half ago. Short and sweet. I've not gotten any comments back from Pastor Shell, but I did send that to him today after Ms. Sifford looked at it and approved it. So I sent it to him and asked him for any comments that they may have on it. But basically, it just spells out similar terms according to what the previous lease was in terms of payment, and in no event will any conveyance occur, of course, until it's fully paid.
And the addendum was lined up to end at the same time as the original agreement.
Correct.
Anybody got any questions, comments?
Yes, sir, I sent you a copy late. They did have a corrected version that had the right description on it. We reviewed it. The comps were from Cabarrus County and were accurate. It was just I think a cut and paste error, and so we are good with what they submitted. Yeah.
All right, can we move that to the consent agenda? All right, next is the Transportation 5310 Elderly and Handicap Budget Amendment. Suzanne Moose and Charles Ratliff.
Hello, good evening, everyone. What we have tonight is just a quick budget amendment for our 5310 grant. Suzanne has the numbers to present to you guys.
Yes, we actually were awarded additional dollars for the 5310 elderly and handicapped transportation. So we wanted to prepare a budget amendment for approval so we could get that approved and place in our budget.
Any questions, comments? Move that to consent agenda. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we have Risk and Safety Annual Bond Approvals. Mr. John Bradley.
Good evening, Commissioners. So I come to you tonight to bring you our annual renewal of bonds for certain employees in positions that require those bonds. So first of all, we have our Finance Director and Deputy Finance Director. Those are both $1 million bonds that we are renewing. We then have the Tax Administrator bond for David Thrift, and that's a $250,000 bond. Then we have the Sheriff's bond, which is a $25,000 bond, and the Register of Deeds bond, which is a $50,000 bond. And I've got the general statutes or any other information that you might need if you have any questions.
Any questions? All right, we'll move that to consent agenda. And we have a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda.
I'll make the motion, we approve the meeting agenda for the 15th.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 4-0 pass. All right. Now, we need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 1A3, and 6, to consult with attorney and discuss personnel matters.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? No. Pass 4-0. We are in closed session.